Okay, in this video I'm going to go ahead and mark an answer that has been submitted by one of our YouTube subscribers. The answer has been submitted by Charlotte Everett, so I want to thank her for sending this in. On the screen here, what you can see is the answer that Charlotte has submitted is on the left, and on the right hand side what I've got is at the top there, it's just a reminder of what the question was, and below that is a mark scheme. So the answer on the left is got 328 words, so it's about the correct volume of words for a 10-point question. Just as a recap, the question was, what are the likely breaches of the Health and Safety at Work Act? Note, you should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. The scenario I haven't included in this video because this is part 3, and I'll put links to parts 1 and 2 so you can have a look and remind yourself of what the actual scenario was that this question is based on. So looking at the mark scheme, you can see that it's numbered 1 through 13. Real mark schemes supplied by NEBOSH aren't actually numbered, but I've numbered this one to make it easier for you watching the video to follow along with where I'm allocating points. Just want to remind you that the scenario, the question and the mark scheme, none of this is actually from NEBOSH. I've kind of mocked all of this up myself based on what I think would be a reasonably accurate representation of what a scenario and a question and a mark scheme would actually look like as supplied by NEBOSH. Turning our attention to the actual mark scheme, it's laid out in sort of 3 sections because there's 3 main breaches that the mark scheme concentrates on. I'll give you the section numbers, but really section numbers aren't that important. You don't need to know section numbers in the certificate qualification, but the breaches are section 2, section 3 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, and also section 36 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Now on the mark scheme there, those are bolded. Failure to ensure safety of non-employees, that's what I've written here, but actually it's the failure to ensure the safety of others that would include non-employees, so that could easily read non-employees, etc. That's section 3, and then there's a bunch of things sort of nested under that, which are sort of points on the mark scheme that can be given for where there is supporting information. The second grouping is failure to ensure the safety of employees, that's section 2, and then the grouping at the bottom is section 36, offences by a body corporate. The items on the mark scheme in bold, I can award points if the learner points out those 3 breaches. So there's 3 points straight away there, but it's a 10-mark question. So you could point out all of the breaches that are applicable and still only end up with 3 marks. What I want you to, and I'll repeat this throughout the video probably, but what I want you to take away from this is it's the supporting information that allows you to pick up the majority of the marks that are available. And what I also want to point out is that a lot of the supporting information on the mark scheme is nested under the breach of failing to ensure the safety of non-employees. But to be honest with you, it could just as easily be nested under the breach of failing to ensure the safety of employees. It doesn't really matter whether it's under section 1 or section 2 or section 3. I'll award points as an examiner as long as the reason for the breach, the supporting information, is there. In order for me to be able to award a mark, I have to know which of those 13 items on the mark scheme I'm awarding the mark against. Let's start reading through the answer. So up the top here it says, remembering that putting people's health and safety at risk is an offence under the Health and Safety at Work Act, even if no one is actually harmed. The employer has likely breached the Health and Safety at Work Act in a number of ways. This kind of reads as a bit of an introduction into the actual meat of the answer. For that bit at the top there, those 3 lines at the top, I can't really find anything on the mark scheme. Be careful. There's no points available for any preamble introductory statements. So you can go ahead with NEBOSH answers and just get right to the point, get straight down to business and start providing your answer. So reading on, the employer has likely breached their duty to. Now I want to just point out, this is a good way of laying out the answer, because by making that statement, the employer has likely breached their duty to, and then making a list underneath it, it saves the learner now having to repeat those words. It would be a repetitive statement. So by just saying it once and then listing underneath it, that's a good economic and efficient use of language there. Ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the safety of their employees. So I can give a mark here, and I can give that mark against item number 9 on the mark scheme. So what I'm going to do is just actually put number 9. Ordinarily it would just be a tick. This is why I wanted to have the mark scheme numbered, so you can follow along in terms of where I'm awarding the marks. So I'm also going to give a mark because what the learner has also pointed out is there's also a breach of the failure to ensure the safety of others, so non-employees, contractors, visitors, that kind of thing. So this is going to be awarded against item number 1 on the mark scheme. So 9 and 1, so that's 2 marks. And what happens is, once I have used up, so to speak, an item on the mark scheme, I can't use it again. So those 2 points, they're in the bag. Even if the learner was to reiterate those points, even in a different way, further on in their answer, there wouldn't be any marks available, because items on the mark scheme can't be used up more than once. So this is the takeaway from that, is to avoid duplication, avoid repeating your points. Easy marks really, because even a rudimentary knowledge of the Health and Safety at Work Act would get people to these 2 marks. Moving on, the second point then, the employer has likely breached their duty to provide employees with a safe workplace and access and egress from it, breaching section 2. Now what I would put here as an examiner is the initials A. What that stands for is already awarded. So if I hadn't awarded the point against item number 9 on the mark scheme, if that hadn't been used up, I'd be awarding it here. But because I've already awarded that mark, I would put already awarded. This is just to let NEBOSH know when they moderate exam scripts what my reasoning is as an examiner. So here, nestled under item number 2 on the answer, is a couple of sub-bullet points that provide information from the scenario. This is where there's the opportunity to gain more marks. Let's read the first sub-bullet point. Given the car park was accessible to guests, employees and presumably contractors, etc., there was a risk that anyone could have fallen through the railings. Now what I would do here is give a mark against item number 10 on the mark scheme, because item number 10 says employees also at risk. So this is what the mark schemes tend to be like, very short bullet points, and then it's up to the examiner to use their experience to figure out how they're going to apply that to the mark scheme to the answer. So employees also at risk, they've made that point with that sub bullet, so I'm going to cross that off the mark scheme. So that's 3 points so far. The second sub bullet, The missing, rusty, corroded nature of the railings was a long-standing issue. That's true. That's information that was supplied in the scenario. And on the mark scheme, number 8, allowed breaches to continue over a long period. So I feel justified in giving a mark against item number 8. The rest of this sub-bullet doesn't really gain any marks. It was easily foreseeable that there was a high risk and plenty of reasonable practicable solutions that could have reduced or even eliminated the risk, yet no action was taken. So there's no further marks available, but still a mark in the bag. So that's 4 marks. Hopefully you can really start to see the value of using supporting information from the scenario to get more marks. So item number 3 is to have a written health and safety policy. Sub-bullet, being a hotel chain, there are going to be more than 5 employees, making a written policy a legal requirement, yet the company could not demonstrate that they had systems in place, which could indicate that no such policy existed. Now, looking at the mark scheme, specifically at number 11, the mark scheme says likely no health and safety policy as lack of arrangements in place. I can give a mark. What I hope you can see is it's not the original statement of a failure to have a written health and safety policy. The mark is being given here because there was supporting information from the scenario to back up that point. If there wasn't the supporting information from the scenario and there were no sub-bullets here and it just says there was a breach because the employer failed to have a written health and safety policy, I wouldn't be able to award the mark, because that's just regurgitating the Health and Safety at Work Act onto the page. It needs to be supported with information from the scenario. This is the most important thing I want you to take away from this exercise, really. On this second sub-bullet, it says if the health and safety policy did exist, there were clearly a number of issues, perhaps with its content and implementation. And I might be tempted to put, already awarded here, because it's really the same sort of point, isn't it? Then it goes on, and associated processes such as insufficient risk assessments, but specific legislation for this lies within regulations, not in the Health and Safety at Work Act. That is correct, but there's no mark available for pointing that out. Again, similar to the preamble at the beginning of the answer, I see this quite a lot in answers, that learners have put information in there, and I think what's happening is learners are saying, well, I'll include this piece of information just in case there might be a mark available. It's a little tidbit of knowledge that I've got, because what they've said there is correct, it's factually correct, but there's still no mark available for it, because that's not in the question. The question is, what are the likely breaches of the Health and Safety at Work Act? That's it. And then supporting that where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. So although it's a factually correct statement to say that to point out that there might be insufficient risk assessments, but that's actually not part of the Health and Safety at Work Act, it's part of the regulations. That is correct, but there's no mark available for it. So think carefully about whether you want to bother with that kind of information in your answer. So this next bit, the director of the hotel chain has also likely breached their duties, as they knew about the issue with the railings, as they had refused to pay for their repair, but did nothing to ensure other measures were put in place, which could be considered negligent. Absolutely. That is a mark there against 13 on the mark scheme. And then this very last point now, the employer's / director's negligence is also evidenced by the fact that the area had not been made safe more than 3 weeks after the incident, which should have been a priority. I'm going to ignore the directors because I'm giving a mark here against item number 7 on the mark scheme. So the employer's negligence is also evidenced by the fact that the area had not been made safe more than 3 weeks after the incident. And on item number 7 on the mark scheme, failed to make appropriate changes following a prior incident, so I'm happy to give a mark for that one. So that's it. That's the end of that question answer. So altogether that's 7 marks out of a possible 10. And as an examiner, what I'm doing is I'm trying to give marks. I think most examiners are like this. We're trying to give marks, so we're looking at the mark scheme and trying to see where we can use this mark scheme to give marks. We're not trying to take marks away or be obstructive. We're actually looking for justification to give the marks. And in this particular answer example, I was able to do that mostly because Charlotte had provided supporting information from the scenario. So there were 3 points available for simply pointing out the breaches, and the other 4 points that Charlotte bagged were because she had supported her answer. I don't know how many times I've reiterated this in this video, but I can't repeat it enough. It's this bit. If you can get your heads around this and embrace this concept, you'll do well. If you can't get your head around this, you'll fail the exam probably. So that's really, really important. So Charlotte had clearly read the scenario and was very effective at applying and demonstrating how to apply that knowledge to it. So I hope that helped, and if you've got your exam coming up soon, I wish you the very best of luck with it.